a big welcome. Thanks for joining us. I'm Robb, the CEO of Mass Participation World. Delighted to be hosting again this in our now fortnightly. We've gone from weekly to fortnightly based on research from participants. Mass Participation World web series. Tonight, hugely excited to be talking about the power of purpose-driven events in the new digital normal. We have a fantastic panel that's going to join us. I'll introduce them in a moment. But as I always do, I'm just going to pop a poll in just to get a sense of who's joined us today, what different sectors you're from. So love you to please fill in that poll as I introduce our panel. Joining us from, if I'm right, Detroit, Michigan, Bryan Lively, Director of Business Development, North America, GivenGain. Hello, Bryan. Welcome. I think you're muted. You might just unmute yourself and say hello there.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Chris, for having me. Pleasure.
Wonderful to see you. Joining us from Boston, Nicole, Juri, Charity Program Director, Boston Athletic Association. Good morning, Nicole.
Morning. Good morning, everyone.
Great to see you. Joining us from Mumbai, George Aikara, COO, United Way of Mumbai. Got some great work happening in Mumbai. Very excited to hear what you've got to share, George. Welcome.
Thank you, Chris. A pleasure to be here.
And in the promo, you would have seen Keith Williams, CMO, COO of Funraisin. There's possibly a tag team, but standing in for him right now, Brendan Rodgers, who's the marketing director of Funraisin. Hello, Brendan.
Hi there, Chris. Thanks for having me. Very different sort of person to Keith. He's cycling around the Highlands of Scotland, which is something I don't think I'd manage, but glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining. Possible, Keith, when he gets off his bike, if he can make it, he's going to come in and join us, but great to have you with us so far. Just a quick word on a couple, as I always do, of other initiatives that Mass Participation World is undertaking or undertakes regularly. We just announced today, save the date for Mass Participation World Online Summit, which will be taking place on the 14th of October. We will be announcing the full program and launching registrations next Wednesday, I think, which is the 23rd, if I've got my dates correct, and have a wonderful program, some amazing speakers locked in already. It will be 2 5-hour sessions replicated, so 8 a.m. Singapore time, 6 p.m. Singapore time. To stretch the globe, we'll be mirroring those. The sessions will be fundamentally exactly the same, albeit obviously with time zones, we might switch a few speakers in and out, but really excited about that. The theme is a blank canvas, mass participation sports reimagined, and looking for people to, we sent out a whole bunch of stuff today on our various channels, so register your interest to make sure that you get all of the communications. Many of you may have seen the aid station. I know some of you who are here, Mike Nishi, for example, has been a guest on the aid station. We just put out episode 80 yesterday. Wonderful interview with Thomas Gallo from Guadalajara in Mexico. We've got a Latin American feel this week. We're going to Costa Rica next, which is very exciting, thanks to an introduction from Mike Nishi. The MPW web series, this is now fortnightly, as I said, and very excited next week to have seen in the past week or 2 weeks, there's a bunch of events starting to happen, not a massive number of them, but a few events, and everyone's very hungry for case studies and examples of what people did. 2 very successful events in the UK. The Limelight delivered the Blenheim Triathlon with, I think, 3,500, 4,000 participants. And we'll have Tom Carey, the COO, coming to share a case study there. And then Tom Bedford, the CEO of RunFest. They had the Kew Gardens 10K. And we hope to have someone from Ironman in Australia with one of the Ironman events. And that'll be a slightly different format. It will be 15-minute presentations with some slide decks and some of the key learnings and some of the initiatives that were successful there. Really excited. Details of those will be shared on the normal channels. And please, at any stage, if I can help you, if you're looking for information, please feel free to email me directly, chris@chrisrobb.asia. I'm just going to end that poll and put the results into for people to see. But as expected, 60% of our participants from mass participation industry. We've got 32% of people from the not-for-profit sector. So I'm going to pop that in there. And while I do that, I'm just going to pop in the second poll, which, if I can get it right, gives us an opportunity just to see what exactly people do in terms of their services. So whilst that's going, Just a quick overview. We're going to try and focus on 5 kind of key areas tonight. We're going to start by setting the scene, getting a sense from the various panels of what's happening in their area. We're then going to talk about one of the trends we're seeing is how these virtual fundraising events are really helping to internationalize the people that participate in events. We're going to talk about the opportunities around new subsets, particularly Gen Z, the philanthro kids, as they sometimes referred to, and the impact that they potentially have with your purpose-driven events. We're going to talk about partnerships and business models, the various interactions between the tech platforms, the organizers and the charities, and the opportunity that purpose-driven events and charity initiatives have to elongate the engagement journey with your participants, and then touch on getting the balance right. We're obviously swung the pendulum heavily towards virtual events, and whilst none of us know where that finish line is, what's it going to look like afterwards in terms of getting that balance of real and virtual events. We'll come back and summarize at the end. We'll take questions as we go through, so please pop those in. But for the time being, enough of me, onto our panelists, and I'd love to start by throwing to you, please, George, over in Mumbai, just to kind of set the scene. What's been happening in India? What's been happening? You have an amazing program with the Tata Mumbai Marathon, which I understand is the biggest philanthropic exercise in India across all platforms. And just love to get a sense of how this has impacted you and a couple of the things you've been doing over a few minutes, please.
Thank you, Chris. The pandemic has hit us in India quite particularly hard. We have had over 5 million cases in the country, which effectively makes us the second most affected country in the world. And given our population and our density in our urban cities, we're not winning this. It's not under control. Even as we speak today, we have more than 1 million active cases in the country. We went into a 4-month lockdown in the country, which created a tremendous amount of hardships and suffering, and almost all charities did their utmost to try and help in whatever capacities they could. And those of us who have been in COVID response have seen an incredible surge in giving. And in this common tragedy has highlighted the suffering of vulnerable communities, which otherwise doesn't come into the mainstream. And but all charities have been massively hit on regular programs. All the focus on the funding has gone towards the tragedy, and that has seen an upsurge. But regular programs, regular projects have, as in India, most charities are very small. They're extremely resource strapped, and most of us have gone into a survival mode as well. The Tata Mumbai Marathon is India's biggest sports philanthropy platform since its inception. Every year, around 300 NGOs, non-profits, depend on the platform to raise funds for themselves. And given this scenario where mass participation events doesn't seem feasible, there's considerable amount of confusion and concern as to what replaces that. But I believe that this also creates a huge amount of opportunities, and there are many more possibilities have opened out. Mostly because as events are forced to compulsorily go virtual, and obviously going virtual, it opens out the entire world out to you, and technology and your adoption of which solutions you adopt is going to be key in developing those possibilities. And there are many types of apps which do one thing, but there is a huge space for innovation. The key challenge is that is in the experience part. When you are when you're shoulder to shoulder with thousands of others in an event, and when that is gone from you in a virtual, how do you recreate that experience? How do you in a virtual or digital format? And that is and each event has its own character on its own model, and that so there is no one size fit which tech solution has already in place. There are different solutions, and I'm very interested to hear from Brendan, Bryan, Nicole, and also from you, Chris, on how these experiences have to be recreated. There are other positives as well. Never before has there been such a heightened awareness of and sensitization to the work of charities, and the desire to help. Running as a sport has the gyms closed, running is what is most popular right now. The desire to help has been at an all-time high. So platforms that can marry the passion along with the purpose are the ones that are going to emerge stronger, and also platforms which create a differentiated experience, because there are a lot of virtual events, a lot of everybody's trying. It doesn't require an event organizer, it needs a tech solution provider if you can do it, if everybody has to run at home or on their own, and that creating that experience is going to be key. So we've been thinking on some of them, and I'm very happy and interested to hear the experience of our other family members on this.
Wonderful. Thanks, George. Why don't we throw across to you, Nicole, because you've just finished your, if I'm right, or you might still have a couple of days to go, your virtual Boston Marathon. And I'm really interested to hear how that's going. In our planning call, you were talking about just the massive number of countries that you'd been touching.
So yes, so we're really excited here at the BAA. We just finished on Monday, the 124th Boston Marathon virtual experience. And so our event was canceled. It's normally takes place in April, and postponed, then canceled. And I'm so proud to work with such a wonderful staff who really did a full pivot from our operations folks who went from putting out road cones to becoming app developers, all within a span of a couple of months. And what we really saw kind of was twofold. From the nonprofit side, although there was a decrease in year-over-year fundraising, so that certainly was to be expected given the great impact of COVID-19, we were not down as significantly as we thought that we may have been. So fundraising was down about 20% year over year. So we went from a total of raising nearly 40 million to this year right now, and probably funds will still trickle in. I think that we'll cap out at about 32, 33 million. So still an extremely impressive total. And knowing that about 10% of those funds were raised primarily through the virtual event. So that's really exciting. And then as far as the reach, it was something that was quite fun for all of us BAA staff to see. We created kind of through our app, we offered a virtual toolkit that provided our participants with kind of a finish line tape, cheer signs, mile markers, things like that really helped make a very individual experience. I mean, there's nothing more individual than running 26 miles. That really made it a fun and memorable experience for all of the participants. So that was really exciting for us here at the BAA.
And Nicole, in terms of, thanks for that, in terms of numbers relative to what you would have normally had in a live event, and in terms of the theme of where we're at and purpose-driven events, is there a sense that there were a bunch of them that signed up specifically because it was an opportunity to support a cause that maybe would not even ordinarily have qualified to run in Boston? So
we decided for our event, we only allowed individuals who were signed up for the in-person event to sign up for the virtual event. So annually, we usually have around 30,000 participants signed up for the Boston Marathon, and we had a little over 18,000 sign up for the virtual experience. So those are pretty exciting numbers from our end, and we were really pleased to see all of the fundraising that occurred kind of all the way through COVID-19 and through the pivot to the virtual event. And we launched some fundraising initiatives ourselves to support COVID relief, and we're quite pleased with the results of those.
That's pretty amazing when you look at that, I mean, it's a great number, 18,000, but relative to your total of 30,000, and then your fundraising overall is only 20% down. It's a really great effort. And you were talking about some of your other events, because you don't just do the Boston Marathon, and any sense in those in terms of whether they're attracting new runners, people that are there just because it's cause related?
So we've had a very busy week here at the BAA. So we finished up the virtual experience on Monday, and on Tuesday we launched our Finish Strong Challenge, which is 3 distances, a 5K, a 10K, and a half marathon. And already we've seen a very kind of an overwhelming excitement from the world of runners for an event that has been traditionally, these events take place in Boston, the 5K, the 10K, and the half marathon. And it's very much so a local event. It's very rare to even have individuals signed up that live outside of the state of Massachusetts. And it's very initial, but right now 20% of registered participants are from outside of Massachusetts, and only 30% of our participants are from the state of Massachusetts. So we're seeing what we all at the BAA hope for, to really expand the reach of these localized events. And these events have all supported nonprofit organizations. And so we're quite excited for these nonprofit organizations to really expand their audience as well. We've already seen some substantial fundraising for the individual nonprofits. We're allowing participants to add additional donations through their registration forms. And it's been a surprise in a very good way with the response that we've received from individuals who are quite familiar with the mission of these organizations, but may not be familiar with the particular organization.
That's fantastic. Bryan, let's stay stateside and get a sense of what you're seeing from your perspective, please.
Well, I think the one really interesting point is that everybody has had to really dig in deep and understand what is important to them, both short-term and long-term, right? There's not a one-size-fits-all model here. From an in-person event, from a virtual event, to the charity makeup, to the long-term vision, of the organization. So I think particularly on the virtual side, I think this is a huge opportunity for events and charities alike to just draw in a new mass participator that they've never seen before. So I think it's interesting, when Nicole and I have been chatting, prior to see, there's such a, qualified race, but then with the other events that they have just launched within the challenge, like Nicole, I registered yesterday because there was a fear of missing out, like your daughter, right? Got on there, because these virtual events are actually selling out. With the Detroit Marathon, which is local and close to home, I went, because I'm the charity director, I went to grab my comp codes from our staff team, and the half marathon is sold out. I'm like, what do you mean it's sold out? It's a virtual event. But the event organizers just can't sell unlimited amount, if they're preparing, the swag, the bibs, everything that goes along with it. So, so I signed up for a longer distance, which I wasn't planning on doing, but I only had the availability to get a men's small shirt, because again, the planning period is just a little bit different. On the overall, I think, scope, Detroit Marathon itself has participants from all 50 states and multiple countries. It's an international event. We actually, pre-COVID, had all 50 states cover pre-COVID, which was the fastest it ever has been. But I think what's even more impressive is just globally, on the GivenGain platform, we're hosting the Women's V Mini Marathon series that's based in Dublin, Ireland. And we have collectively raised just shy of €100,000. There's over 600 individual fundraisers. We're touching 23 countries, and 167 charities are supported for an inaugural event. So I think, especially with a lot of the folks that are on the call today too, there's not one that I believe is doing it the same, right? They're all really understanding what is, brought back to their roots. One call out, I'd even say, Chris Marshall's on from Muscular Dystrophy Association, and I know they're part of the Boston, Marathon as well, but they're bringing back the telethon. Who would have ever thought that would have been happening, right? But I think with this day and age, with the audience that they have, with the audience that they want to have, with the technology that's available, with the community, they have a great celebrity new host, right, that's coming to the table. It's important to bring that back and go back to the basics. So I think that's pretty impressive too, to touch, what will be a much larger audience overall. And so good, bad, or indifferent around COVID, it's made us all think, how, and be probably a little bit grittier, how to survive within the space.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, sold out virtual events. Yeah, you wouldn't believe it, would you? On that note, so obviously, anecdotally, we're hearing all over the world numbers of runners, cyclists, people being active is exploding, that you would expect might funnel into these events. Any kind of sense of how many of them are being driven because they loving the running and they want to have an outlet and want to be part of something, and how many of them are being kind of tipped over by the fact that so many of these are purpose driven and cause related?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I think everybody, just like the events and the charities, have had to dig inside a little bit internally, excuse me. I think people have done the same. I think, because of, stay-at-home orders and the current situation, more people are out running because they don't have the ability to get to gyms quickly and things like that, depending on where you're at in the world. I have the fortune of talking to many different types of runners. I was on a call last night, with a 62-year-old new runner whose husband is, just got diagnosed with Parkinson's. So she's running for a very different reason. And then I talked to, a gentleman, who's, early 30s, who's been running, marathons 3 or 4 a year and is now purpose driven just because of some of the life changes, through the overall climate of the world today. So I would say it's, if I had to be a number guy, I'd probably just go 50-50. I mean, I think people are just getting out to do, but I also think the programs with a charitable component to them are being more sought after than not. So I think most event organizers, either know or have the understanding that they have the ability to add a charitable component to the overall event. And if they do, they will bring new and different runners.
That's great insight. Thanks. Brendan, let's jump up to you before Keith turns up in his Lycra and pushes you off the stage. Make sure we at least give you an opportunity to have a chat. But tell us a little bit what you're seeing from a fundraising perspective and obviously, UK perspective, please.
Well, it's been, it absolutely echoes everything that's been said. I think that COVID has caused, in a way, it's been a bit of a wake-up call for the not-for-profit scene. Definitely in the UK, but I think possibly globally, the not-for-profit scene has been a bit behind the private sector, perhaps, in terms of adopting digital and progressing in terms of embracing the ways to develop those supporter experiences and really boost that engagement and those conversions, which is what equals donations when we're talking about digital fundraising. And I think COVID forced us all to absolutely immediately shift over to things like Zoom and to start looking at virtual events. And suddenly we see trustees of charities saying, actually, this matters. And that reallocation and redistribution of funds has really mattered for the sector. And in terms of what events we've seen, the opportunity for creativity has been absolutely mind-blowing. There are, just off the top of my head, there's an amazing one in Australia right now called Mullets for Mental Health, which is approaching 3 million AUD right now. And it's got some of the most amazing press you'll ever see in your life. But there's, we've seen things like the May 50K, which was, just an international 50K virtual event, and that has done brilliantly. And the key thing that in each case of these events that have done well, it has been about, as George said, the supporter experience. And I think that these events coming back to, in the charities cases, it's been about looking at their supporters and their participant bases and who their warm audiences are. But absolutely, if they have potential corporate and event organizer partnerships, there's been some fantastic matched giving days. There's been some fantastic opportunities for collaboration. We're seeing some great stuff with the Royal Bank of Canada doing an event across 36 countries right now. And I think one of the most interesting things right now is how event participants are almost becoming content creators as they go into these virtual events. And it kind of redefines how I think of an event participant, because they suddenly have the opportunity to share Instagrams, TikToks, and almost become marketers in their own right for the causes, and it shows proliferation of good. And I think that is in its own right is such a fantastic opportunity when we're talking about partnerships and purpose-driven events.
I love that, proliferation of good. What a wonderful phrase. I'm just going to pop another poll in and then head back to George. Just interested to get a sense. We've spoken quite a lot about new runners, and I'm just going to pop a poll in there just to get a sense of what people think, where these runners are coming from, and so on. But George, interested, you spoke about tech platforms. You're in a position where, Tata Mumbai Marathon, massive event, incredible experience. I was fortunate enough to be there earlier this year, and an amazing experience. How are you now working with tech platform partners and the different charities that that are involved with the event to create that experience that you spoke about? Any unique ideas that have come to mind, and a little bit of talking about that, how that partnership works? So you've got the ProCam guys, you've got yourselves, and you've got all the different charities that are supported, and a tech partner. How do you create that kind of right mix to have a successful marriage that maximizes the impact potential and the experience?
So Chris, before the pandemic and before we were forced into the virtual area, our structure primarily focused with ProCam, the event organizers, focusing on the race day experience, and that is, we're working towards more accurate timekeeping and how to measure it and recreating the race day experiences. Our role has been fundraising has been digitally. Fundraisers have been creating fundraising pages just like everywhere else. So fundraising as a segment has always already been in a virtual state. The key challenge that we are trying to overcome right now is and we have different segments. So we have individuals and we have corporate participation, where companies send in teams of employees, and that is an employee engagement activity by itself. And there are, unlike the Boston Marathon, where there are the serious runs, there's also something called the Dream Run, which is a 5-kilometer run. There are other different types of segments. There's a 10K, everything incorporated. So the different participation possible for different levels of athletic. And of course, it's very hard to get into the half marathon. And getting companies involved starts way in advance. So employees register, there's a 3-month period in which the employees come together, raise funds together, try to reach those eligibility platforms, the swag, the levels that you have to achieve, and to recreate that. So when we go virtual and when there is no race day experience that is going to be possible, what we are trying to recreate is the challenge part. Can we find out which is the most corporate group or the corporate team, which is a set of people, and the charities are also evolving. Something that Brendan mentioned as well, that the situation has forced us all to climb up the learning curve. As charities, we've been way behind in our adoption of technology. So charities offering services, training programs, creating this loyalty group, which can now virtual trainings. So creating communities well in advance of the event. So it's not just the race day experience by itself, but it is the lead up to, which creates this, which substitutes the mass participation feeling that is there. We're trying to make it so that everybody who's coming via the philanthropic route has a different experience and is part of a community. So that is what we've been working on, building those community groups, how those leaderboards would look like. Can you sort it by age, category, locality? Can you find groups of runners around you can we introduce people together and not just have that entire participation in isolation? There's a lot of thoughts on it. Just integrating it all has been into one platform. There are different, having it all in one place has been, is what the challenge has been.
So fundamentally, you're still in development phase, looking towards next year's event. There's nothing that's been launched at this stage. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we're lucky that the event happens in January. Typically, by now, the registrations are already closed for next year. This year, we're going to start that a little till we have more clarity on what aspects need to be in and out. So we have some time.
Yeah, and you spoke about this opportunity, which I feel is one of the great opportunities of this myself, is the elongation of the engagement journey. So normally entries would have closed. You haven't launched yet, but that's as a result of maybe, you know, building the tech and being ready for it. But in the lead up, assuming that there may be an event next year in February, which is probably a bit of a long shot. February, January, I've lost track, but it's the beginning of the year, is in February normally. Am I correct?
It's the third week of January that date
Third
might
week of
get.
January, that's right, yeah.
Yeah.
So where do you think you're up to in terms of when that will launch to be able to create that journey that you were speaking about? Will it launch fairly soon to build up to it and then continue afterwards?
Yes, so the uncertainties on ground permissions, it would be a hybrid model for sure. Reduced now, 55,000 people participate. So 55,000 in a place like Bombay is highly congested. There's no way we can manage social distancing. So it has to be a narrowed down pool. Is going to be even more difficult to participate. But getting those permissions and like I mentioned, right now our cases are too high and there's a lot of uncertainty on ground permissions. And so that is the hang up, but more or less other aspects have been worked upon. As Procam is already is going ahead with the Airtel Delhi Half Marathon, which is the second biggest property running event in the country. So again, ground permissions are the unknown part, and how to conduct it in a safe manner. That is where the gap is.
Yeah. And what's your sense of internationalizing it? So, you know, I'm hearing stories anecdotally from many countries that there's so many Indians that are participating in virtual runs in other parts of the world. Do you see that what's likely to happen? Because, you know, from what I saw on the ground there's not a massive tourism influx which comes for the TCS Mumbai Marathon. Do you think that this is going to create this greater awareness and you'll have many people from other countries? And are you actually targeting that as part of your strategy to say, how do we get Americans to run the virtual Mumbai Marathon and people from Europe and Australia and Asia and other parts of Asia and so on?
Yeah, Chris, so that is exactly where the biggest opportunity is. And every conversation I've had with either charities or other participants has been towards this, that there is no longer the geographical limitation that you have to be in Bombay in that time. And it's a difficult, even within Bombay, it's difficult to reach that area. When you remove that, and there's so much tremendous interest, registration gets sold out every year because of the limitations that exist. We no longer have that limitation. And as long as we are able to recreate those experiences wherever you are, that is going to be a huge opportunity. And not just Indians in the US or elsewhere in the world. There is this, it's one of the great marathons. So that everybody who wants to do, who otherwise would find it extremely difficult to travel all the way to India to participate, here is an opportunity. And a lot of runners have also been writing in to find out more about, because now they can, sitting at home, you can actually do all the marathons across the world. You can participate in all of them. So that's a massive opportunity, yes.
Yeah. Brendan, I'm interested to carry on, Bryan, sorry.
Yeah, no, just want to jump in. I think there's two pieces I'd like to touch on. I think the first one is, you know, from a technology standpoint, you know, I have yet to see one platform do it all for a charity. You know, the way that technology sits, the new functionality that's released today is extinct tomorrow. So it's very challenging, in my opinion, I think, to find a technology provider to be able to do it all if I put my charity hat on. I do think, though, you know, to Nicole and even Brendan's comments earlier, there's a good portion of the NPO space that is behind the times. That's just a true statement, and that's no dig at anyone at all. So I think Nicole's comment, you know, and BAA as a charity itself, right, is that, you know, people who were out at one point setting up cones are now app developers. I mean, it's given, you know, charities and events alike an opportunity to potentially become more technology forward, which I think is just a great thing overall for so many people. And then depending on the audience, you have to realize, like, that, you know, 62-year-old woman that I spoke to last night trying to onboard onto an activity app is very different than Brendan's comment of the social storyteller on TikTok. Do you need them both as a nonprofit? Absolutely. You know, so you do have to, as a nonprofit as well as an event, to be able to figure out how you can speak to not just both of those audiences, but what I would say is all audiences. So as a nonprofit partner or as an event partner or as, you know, a technology provider, it's almost like be able to really be successful in your lane and then be able to try to, you know, elevate and touch everything else, which I think is really, really important. So that's on the tech side. I think, you know, George's commentary and what I'm seeing too in the virtual space, which I think is just very interesting. You know, I noted earlier that I registered for the Boston Challenge, right? I would not have prior to yesterday been able to fly to Boston for 3 different events, right? My wife and my kids probably wouldn't have allowed it to, you know, take the time away from the family. So it's now offering a really great opportunity of bringing these virtual events, you know, to your own backyard. I hope, I pray actually that, you know, mass participation events are never gone, because there's nothing like being involved in one of those events, right? But it actually has now opened the door to so many people to partake in an event that they may never have ever been able to partake in prior to, right? From an economic standpoint, from a distance, from whatever it may be. So there's really good opportunity there. So I do think, you know, why I chuckled yesterday, I was like, what do you mean I can't register for the virtual half marathon for Detroit, right? It's in my backyard. But that's going to be a reality as these events now go and plan for future pieces. But how cool would it be if I can now virtually register, right, for the Mumbai marathon and run that, and then, to Brendan's point, be a great storyteller and an activist within that space and choose to fundraise on, you know, just giving, Funraisin, GivenGain, GoFundMe, whatever it may be. There's so much content there that opens up the door for so many, which I think is fantastic.
Great points. Thank you, Bryan. And you know, one of the things that I posted today on LinkedIn when I announced the online summit is that, you know, I believe, sadly, that fundamentally the mass participation business model has been broken for a long time. And, you know, COVID has fast forwarded that for us. And I think we had an inevitable tsunami coming for much of our industry. And, you know, one of the things that I think needs to be done is that the business model needs to be reinvented. And this potentially plays into that, albeit that we've got, you know, balancing up that, supporting the event organizer, supporting the ecosystem and the platforms, and making sure that the right share gets to the charity at the end of the day. I'm interested, maybe throw to you, Brendan, to kind of understand the business models around these. So, you know, we're talking about charities saying, well, they haven't been right up to it from a tech perspective. They haven't been able to invest. So now they're raising this money. They're having to pay catch up. They've got, you know, we heard stories before we went online. George was telling us, you know, some of the terrible challenges they're facing in India, the charities, to be able to support the people out there, and 6 people in a small room with, you know, domestic violence happening and all those kind of things. So this dilemma of, we need to invest in tech or get up to speed in tech to make sure that we can raise the funds, but how much of that money needs to be invested, and, you know, without expecting you to give away, you know, confidential business things, is how does the model work now with all these things happening? Is, you know, is there some potential risk that people out there, you know, there ends up being some negative press because there's all these virtual events happening, and some sensationalist media comes up and says, hey, you know, here's an event that only 10% of the funds ended up with the charity. Is just some sense around that to make sure that we don't end up with egg on our face with these wonderful initiatives that are happening.
I think that and I mean, definitely I've seen, and I think you do see, you know, year on year in the charity sector, probably worldwide, you know, articles like that. I think there's a bit of responsibility on the platforms themselves to be incredibly transparent and incredibly considerate, and, you know, and very, very clear with the organizations getting involved about things like fees and how they work, and the same thing with donors at the point of donation. And ideally to be very flexible. And I think there's also an important role for the not-for-profits themselves to be quite considerate of what level of platform you need when you're choosing that as well, because of course there are loads of different sorts of technology options available to you as a not-for-profit, and you don't necessarily need the whole cake. You might just need one part of it, and you know, and that can wildly impact what you're doing and how you're using it. But that said, you also want to create the best supporter experience. So it really is, it's a difficult thing to navigate, but I think one of the important things to do is just to make sure that everyone who is involved, from fundraisers to donors to trustees to event organizers, that everyone is clear about what proceeds are going where. And the return on investment should always be fantastic for the charity. The idea of 10% is in my opinion, you know, kind of too much as a fee. That's a lot of money. And, you know, I think these days a lot of platforms are offering, I mean, certainly we do, but a lot of platforms are offering the opportunity for the donor to add a percentage to the donation. You know, generally it has a name similar to like donor cover or something like that. You know, which makes no real difference to the donor, a couple of cents or a couple of pence to the pound or something, but covers the fee of their donation. And, you know, all these different models really free up and add the transparency to the donor experience, and they free up the charity.
Brendan, I would even just add there too. I mean, just especially for all of our NPOs on the call, I mean, there is absolutely no reason in my mind that an NPO cannot find a platform that can't almost guarantee, you know, 98% of every dollar or pound going back to the charity with the functionality that you just mentioned. And I think what's even important to share too is that a lot of NPOs believe that if they set up their own, you know, processing, you know, it'll be less expensive for them. They just won't have all the functionality that comes with that. And 9 times out of 10, it's actually more expensive for the NPO to set up their own payment processing because they're not able to add in that great functionality that Brendan just referred to of donor cover the fee and whatnot. So they're actually paying more and they're managing more. So the platforms have become competitive in that way as well, which I think is a really good thing for the charitable space. Absolutely.
That's
actually, I totally agree with that. And there's just to add, one area where it does perhaps become a bit of a shade of grey and almost becomes a bit of a judgment call for the non-for-profit, and this is where maybe like third-party experts can help advise and this sort of thing, is when it comes to the individual platforms, each platform will probably promise a certain percentage of engagement levels and conversion levels. And this is a sort of space where you can really, and it will affect your charity differently, but if you know, conversions equal donations in the fundraising world. So this is where if you're getting high engagement with your event and if you're getting high conversion rates, then you're going to get more donations through. And the fee that you're paying, especially if there's an upfront fee, is really going to become minimal compared to, you know, necessarily things like you should never end up in a situation where you're going to get bad press for putting on a great event, especially if you're using a modern day platform.
Thanks for that, Nicole. I'd love to come back to you. You haven't had a chance to get a word in with these guys, and let's get you back on the platform. I'd love to hear from you what some of your learnings were. I mean, you know, some fascinating insights of, you know, people putting out road cones and becoming app developers and those kind of things. What, you know, take us through a little bit of, you know, some of the process that you went through as you pivoted and some of the learnings that might be valuable for people that are listening. We've got a mix of, you know, there's a lot of not-for-profits on here tonight. There's a lot of event organizers. And I guess in many ways you wear both hats there. So I'd love to get some of those insights in terms of the learnings, please.
Happy to. I mean, I think first and foremost, all of my colleagues at the BAA, our focus for every event we put on is truly the experience of our participants. And so we took that as our goal to make it an excellent experience when putting on the virtual experience. I mean, there is truly, I mean, virtual events are wonderful, but there is kind of no real replacement for the real thing. But we tried our very best at the BAA. And I think one of the really cool things that we did with our app was creating some audio cues that allowed participants, if they chose to run with the app, which most of our participants did, to hear the sounds that they would experience along the Boston Marathon course. So the Boston Marathon has been around for quite a long time and has some kind of really iconic sections. one of which is the Scream Tunnel at Wellesley College, which for those on the call who aren't familiar is about halfway through the course. It's a college of women. It's infamous for a very, very excited cheering section with people offering kisses to runners if they would like along the course. And so we work to recreate moments like that with our app so that we could truly bring Boston to the world. And we, from seeing our results, and obviously they're preliminary results given that we're only 3 days out, that built some huge excitement among our participant base, and also had a great impact on fundraising, because if it's a good experience, people want to be part of the event, people want to raise funds for their nonprofit, and that really does kind of turn into additional dollars. So I think kind of focusing on the experience piece was a big learning and a big success for us at the BAA. And then I also think kind of from where I sit, and I have the honor of working with over 200 nonprofits that fundraise through the BAA, kind of my biggest learning, and it's something that I've learned throughout my almost 6 years at the BAA and has never become more apparent during COVID, was just kind of the power of the personal relationship. And the nonprofits who truly succeeded as far as continuing their fundraising and not just kind of stopping fundraising due to COVID were the ones that were able to have kind of close personal relationships with the athletes that they recruited to become members of their team, and those who were best able to communicate to the team members who kind of may not have been extremely connected to their mission, but to communicate to those individuals that kind of heart disease and cancer and food insecurity do not end because of COVID-19. And in some ways, they only are exacerbated. And so the importance of these individuals continuing to fundraise was even more important now than it was in the past. So I think those are two of our biggest learnings. But I say as a joke, I've never learned so much professionally, and I would say personally in the past 6 months. And I think that in many ways, individuals all over the world have kind of reevaluated their lives and realized what's most important to them. And I think that that's only a good thing for nonprofit organizations, because we've seen kind of a recommitment to causes here in the US.
Thanks.
Nicole, I have a question for you. You know, around, because I participate in some of the Boston Marathon virtual expo weekend, and I thought you guys just did an amazing job. So kudos and hats off to you. I think, you know, then while I was watching some of it, I was thinking too, it's like, how many times would I choose to potentially pass on picking up my bib at an expo and technically donating like a fee to charity to have to bypass some of that experience? Now, I know the expo is an experience within itself, but I think to some, do you think that, you know, we'll continue to be creative, you know, around moments in time to potentially heighten the awareness and even the fundraising, you know, for the charities? Because something like that, to me, I would donate $50, $100. I did not have to wait an expo line, you know, to grab that and go. And I think there's just probably new moments that will come of that, but just wondering, you know, if you had any initial thoughts around the virtual expo.
So, I mean, the virtual expo, it was one of the many first time we had ever gotten a chance to reimagine an event that, I mean, traditionally all over the world, a marathon expo is a marathon expo. So kind of when given the opportunity to reimagine things and having the success that we had with our virtual expo, I think that really opens the door for my colleagues and I at the BAA, and also for other event organizers and nonprofits, to kind of really take a hard look at the ROI on the things that we have all been doing as institutions and organizations that we kind of just did because that's the way that you do them. So I know that it has, I've seen from other nonprofit organizations, it's encouraged them to kind of be more scrappy and creative and entrepreneurial in the way they approach things. And I think that is the same for the BAA. And so I know that my colleagues and I will really, depending on kind of what this new COVID and post-COVID world brings us, we'll be looking at every aspect of the event to see if what we are doing truly makes sense for us as an organization, kind of creates the best possible experience for our participants, and other ways, like you said. I mean, I never would have thought of that people might be interested in making a donation so they can skip a line, but I've become very accustomed in this COVID life to delivering everything in curbside pickup. So I'm sure many other folks have as well. So what ways can we kind of monetize that to promote fundraising for nonprofit organizations? So some cool ideas and some cool discussions, I think, for the future for my colleagues and I.
It's awesome. Well, hats off again.
That's
nice work.
Wonderful. That's a great insight. There's a question here for you, Nicole, from Ben Williams. Did Boston build their own app with the audio cues, etc., or did they leverage off an existing platform? And if so, which platform?
So we built our own app. So we worked with a team of developers and built our very own app in record time. So my hats off to all of my colleagues that were quite involved with that.
So that's amazing. So you've now got that. So in terms of, let's fast forward next year, COVID's gone, the real on-ground event's going to happen. Have you already started to think in terms of what role that virtual event may happen in the lead up to it? I mean, obviously you were very probably targeted, for want of a better expression, more so than everyone else has kind of said, everyone come and do our virtual event. You were very specific about it's only people that qualified for Boston in line with your tradition. So is there now a scope to say, okay, the virtual events will be part of our support events, or there'll be an element of Boston next year, which will be virtual, maybe for those that miss out and the real people will get to run it? Has there been any thought given to that?
So I think that we're just in the initial stages for kind of planning for what the future of the Boston Marathon brings. But all that we learned and all that we did in building the app for this year's virtual experience for the Boston Marathon, we're moving forward to use in our Finish Strong challenge. So we'll be using kind of all of the hard work that we did on this app for an app for our virtual Finish Strong challenge. So that will be kind of the first kind of dip into our new world of truly putting on virtual events at the Boston Athletic Association. And for an organization that's been around for quite a long time, this is a pretty cool next step for us. So I would imagine that we are not going to, in the post-COVID world, kind of throw everything that we learned these past 6 months and we did in the trash can. And that we'll be incorporating kind of many of these learnings and kind of new things that we developed into the future.
Yeah, and look, I think that's such a key. I was on talking to someone, I can't even remember where it was, and they'd kind of done their virtual event as a replacement, and the comment was, "Thank God that's over. I hope I never have to do it again." And I just thought that was such a missed opportunity, because I think these virtual events create this amazing engagement opportunity. Obviously, the opportunity to elongate the experience, but also raise more money for charity. We've got about 5 minutes left. Typically what I do is I summarize, but I'm going to do it a little bit differently today, and I'm going to throw to each of you, if I may, and just in line with our theme of the power of purpose-driven events in the new digital normal. I'm going to come back where I started, George, and I'm going to just ask you to kind of identify one really powerful thing that you think is going to impact what you can do with United Way in the Mumbai Marathon from a purpose perspective to help enhance the experience and raise more money. So I'll just come to each of you in turn. One key takeaway for the people that have come to join us tonight.
For me, the one thing would be to reimagine the entire community experience that goes along with an event, and in the unique Indian and Mumbai tradition that we have had, to how to recreate that, and that requires a lot of reimagining. We have thoughts and great insights as well from Nicole. To incorporate and build that would be what we would be focusing on.
Thanks, George. Let's come down to you, Bryan.
I just think at the end of the day, engagement is king or queen. I think you have to engage, you have to do things differently, you have to include more. So I love, Nicole, the app that's been built, and, hear the cheering and the sounds of that to bring it to life. So engagement will continue to rule for the foreseeable future.
Thank you. Just if anyone's got any questions, please feel free. I see Someone has got their hand up. I'm not sure if that's an accident. It's been up for a while. Let me just, sorry, give me 2 minutes to see who that is. Dennis, if you've got a question, if you wouldn't mind, just type it in the chat while we throw to Brendan. Maybe you just accidentally clicked on that. But Brendan, your key takeaway, please.
I think the thing that stood out to me is, as we approach live events possibly making a return, that virtual's kind of proven itself as a capable replacement, should we say, or like an in-between. And I think it's going to be really interesting to hear about Nicole's app as a companion experience. And I think that's something which is going to really be part of 2021 and going forward, is these companion virtual experiences to live, and this kind of mixed, almost like a mixed media approach to live and virtual events. But it really is, as both Bryan and George have just said, it's all going to boil down to the supporter experience, the participant experience, and the levels of engagement that come from that.
Thanks, Brendan. Nicole, last save to you.
Yeah, it's my biggest takeaway kind of from all of this is kind of being true to who you are as an organization. I think it's kind of very easy to forget or to become distracted by everything that's going on in the world and all the pivots that organizations are kind of being forced in many ways to take. But I think that we learned at the BIA over the past few months that kind of the importance of staying true to who we are as an organization and as an event really helped us focus on putting on what we think was a really successful virtual experience. So be sure to, don't forget where you came from, even though this is a very different place and will continue to change.
That's wonderful insight. Really great way to end. Thank you. Just a very quick reminder before I thank our panelists. If there's anything I can help you with, please feel free, email me directly, chris@chrisrobb.asia. In a fortnight's time, we should have some wonderful case studies that will be on the Thursday, the 1st of October. Watch out if you haven't been getting the notifications. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Look at the Mass Participation World Facebook page. This is being live streamed on Facebook, and the recording will be on the YouTube channel. So if any of your colleagues have missed out, I think it's been a wonderful discussion with so many great insights. So please spread the knowledge. And then a reminder of the MPW Online Summit, which will take place on the 14th of October. Registrations in the program will open next week. Again, you can get details of those through the normal channels. But please join me in virtually thanking our panelists. From the top of my screen, Brendan Rodgers, who's in England. I didn't even get to ask you exactly where you were, Brendan, but thanks for standing in for Keith. He's lost his job for good. Stay in the Lycra. Keep cycling, Keith. Thank you so much, Brendan.
Thank you, and yeah, sorry, Keith obviously is in the areas without any reception, but I'm very glad to have been here. Cheers.
No, wonderful, really appreciate it, and send our best to Keith for the rest of his ride. So much.
Yeah,
Nicole, Juri from Boston Athletics Association.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun to spend what is the early morning here in Boston with you all. Yeah.
Wonderful. You can now go and say good morning to your daughter and spend some time with her. Really appreciate you making the time. From Mumbai in India, George Aikara. Thanks, George.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you all. It's a pleasure hearing you all.
Aikara, I should say. Apologies for the mispronunciation. And also even earlier than Nicole, all the way over in Detroit, I think, if I'm right, Bryan Lively, I think you're an hour earlier, but really appreciate you getting up to join us. It's been wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone that's joined us. Have a wonderful evening, day, morning ahead, and we'll see some of you, hopefully many of you, in a fortnight's time. All the best. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.